Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the January meeting of the East Central Independent School District Board of Trustees. It's nice to see all of these great faces out here this evening. We're going to get started so that everybody can get home on time. So, Ms. Perientos, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Del Brazil.
Present.
Monique Prezes. Victor Garza.
Here.
James Mulkey.
Here.
John Massengo.
Here.
Mr. Bryant, we have a quorum.
Thank you, ma'am. Item 2, our prayer and the pledge. Mr. Toscano, please.
Yes, sir. I'd like to call our principal from Sinclair Elementary School, Ms. Stacy Johnston, to the podium.
I brought my fan club. Good evening, Mr. Toscano, Mr. Bryant, members of the board. It is my honor to come before you today and present some exceptional students from Sinclair Elementary. Tonight I brought 3 first grade dual language students from Miss Munoz's dual language class to say the pledges for you. Blythe Hall, wave, wave, wave. Jackson Cavazos, Kennedy Nathaniel, who was our December superintendent student of the month. And the prayer is going to be said by Chloe Saldana, who's a 3rd grader in Miss Cornejo's class. So I'm going to go ahead and let the students say the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Prometo llevar la bandera de los Estados Unidos de América y la República representa una nación ante Dios, indivisible con libertad y justicia para todos. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one indivisible. Honrar la bandera de Texas, te prometo libertar a ti, Texas, un estado ante Dios, único e indivisible. The pride Sinclair the Mustang, pride and joy we share. The pride Sinclair the Mustang, we always show we care. The pride Sinclair fidelity, that we always do. The pride Sinclair can never stop. We're always at the top, at the top.
Dear Lord, you are the giver of all good gifts, and we thank you today for all your blessings for the successful outcomes of our school events, and for all our students, parents, and staff members. We ask that you bless them, and we continue to seek your wisdom, guidance, courage, and strength. Be with our board in their deliberation, and help them in the decisions they will make for the good of all those who have placed their trust and confidence in their leadership. Grant us the humility to always seek your will in that all we do and say. In the name we pray, amen. Amen.
Okay, now we'd like to introduce Miss Ravello and Miss Mendiola. They brought some students to perform for you guys, so I'm going to let them introduce their students.
Good evening. I'm going to introduce the names of our folkloric dancers. Jonathan Muñoz and Nazaria Marroquín. Anaya Rivas and Matthew Guerra. Itzeyana Tiscareno and Sani Oliva, Jake Brown and Daniela Lopez. And we want to give special thanks for those parents, our parents, always providing our unconditional support every time our kids are called to perform. Thank you.
Ready? Okay, 1, 2, 3.
See what I mean when I said we have exceptional kids? They are exceptional. So I would like to first recognize all the parents. So parents of all of these wonderful students, if you'll stand up, please, so we can recognize you. Our school would not be what it was without the parent support, so thank you all very much for bringing your kids out here to perform for us. Also, thank you to all the staff that's here, staff members, if you'll stand up as well. Thank you. And I want to thank you all for allowing us to showcase our fabulous students. We have given you a small token in the brown bags, and I will say the cookies were made by one of our own, Miss Haddon. So if Miss Haddon's here, shout out to Miss Haddon. But thank you all for your time. We appreciate you letting us be here.
Thank you.
Wow. We've not had a meeting start off that way in a long time. What an exciting way to start our evening from the young folks who did that great, great Pledge of Allegiance. You guys were just there and take charge. Very good. Very good. Very good. A very inspiring prayer, and then some great entertainment. So thank you so much for being here with your students this evening. We're going to move into the awards part of our meeting tonight. We have some police officers that we're going to swear in. So if y'all would just kind of hang with us for a minute, I promise after the awards we'll take a recess. And those of you who need to go home and do homework can do that. Those of you who need to go home and grade homework can do that. And we'll get on with the rest of our meeting at that point. So, Mr. Toscano, I believe we're at awards and recognitions.
Yes, sir. Ms. Colas?
Good evening, Mr. Bryant, Mr. Toscano, members of the board. First, we would like to recognize our board members. So if I could ask all the board members to come down up front. January is Board Recognition Month. And our theme this year from TASB is that school boards plant seeds of knowledge. And so if y'all will come on down. We have a token of our appreciation for y'all, a watering can, an EC decal, some seeds to plant, and we've got some poems that some of our high school kids wrote for y'all. So as a community, we would like to thank you, our school board trustees, for devoting your time to supporting public education and serving our students, teachers, administrators, custodians, bus drivers, maintenance, and custodial workers. And our cafeteria workers. Trustees represent the community, and they face complex and demanding challenges, yet few people fully understand the scope and far-reaching implications of their responsibilities. Their job is to establish a vision for our education program, create policies to achieve that vision, assure that schools are accountable to the community, and strongly advocate for continuous improvement in student learning. They truly make a difference every day. Our trustees are responsible for an annual budget of approximately $173 million. They are responsible for 10,000 students' education, for 1,400 employees, over 12 campuses and different departments, and their voices represent a community of more than 50,000 citizens. Though we make a special effort in January, Board Appreciation Month, to show appreciation to y'all, our trustees, we know that your contribution reflects a year-round commitment. In addition to their day jobs, trustees attend evening meetings and school functions. They review reports, agendas, and proposals, and they must meet continuing education requirements on issues affecting public education. Our trustees of 82 years invested in serving the East Central ISD on the school board. Our trustees generously give of themselves to ensure that decisions directly affecting our schools are made thoughtfully. In these challenging times for public education, their ultimate goal is always focused on the future success of our children in this district, and we applaud their willingness to serve as advocates for our children and the voice of public ed. We thank you. If there are any family members of our school board trustees here present, I see a few. Yay! Thank y'all for giving us your loved ones. Thank you, sir. Next up, we're going to share with everyone a video that was played last night at the Patterson dedication. It's really awesome, and it goes right with our second recognition for the evening, which is going to be to swear in a couple of our police officers. So, I'm going to go there. I learned how to use this double screen today, so let's see.
If we look to the answer as to why for so many years we achieved so much, prospered as no other people on earth, it was because here in this land we unleashed the energy and individual genius of man to a greater extent than has ever been done before. Freedom and the dignity of the individual have been more available and assured here than in any other place on earth. The price for this freedom at times has been high, but we have never been unwilling to pay that price. Those who say that we're in a time when there are no heroes, they just don't know where to look. The sloping hills of Arlington National Cemetery, with its row upon row of simple white markers bearing crosses or stars of David, they add up to only a tiny fraction of the price that has been paid for our freedom. Each one of those markers is a monument to the kind of hero I spoke of earlier. Their lives ended in places called Belleau Wood, the Argonne, Omaha Beach, Salerno, and halfway around the world on Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Pork Chop Hill, the Chosin Reservoir, and in 100 rice paddies and jungles of a place called Vietnam. Under one such marker lies a young man, Martin Treptow, who left his job in a small-town barber shop in 1917 to go to France with the famed Rainbow Division. There on the Western Front, he was killed trying to carry a message between battalions under heavy artillery fire. We're told that on his body was found a diary. On the flyleaf, under the heading My Pledge, he had written these words: America must win this war. Therefore I will work, I will save, I will sacrifice, I will endure. I will fight cheerfully and do my utmost as if the issue of the whole struggle depended on me alone. We must realize that no arsenal or no weapon in the arsenals of the world is so formidable as the will and moral courage of free men and women. It is a weapon our adversaries in today's world do not have. It is a weapon that we as Americans do have. Let that be understood by those who practice terrorism and prey upon their neighbors. As for the enemies of freedom, those who are potential adversaries, they will be reminded that peace is the highest aspiration of the American people. We will negotiate for it, sacrifice for it. We will not surrender for it now or ever. We are Americans.
I got it. I'll send it to you.
Next up, we have Chief to swear in our 2 new police officers.
Thank you, Ms. Colis. Superintendent, Board President, Board members, Thank you for having us. It's my honor and pleasure to introduce 2 new officers to our East Central family. I'm going to introduce the first officer, who is Officer Leonard Embry. He is assigned to our new Tradition Elementary School. Officer Embry was it's a new addition to the police department as part of y'all's plan for the safety and security of our district. And when we opened up the new elementary, Officer Embry was selected out of many applicants. Officer Embry has over 30 years as a San Antonio police officer who just recently retired, decided to continue working, and wanted to come work over here. We are honored to have his son here too, Leonard Embry III. A lot of y'all know him at Heritage Middle School. So Leonard's been with us 14 years. I'm sure Dad will be here just as long, right? The second officer I'm going to introduce is Ms. Deborah Serta. Officer Serta also has a long career with law enforcement. She did 25 years as a state highway patrol officer. She held several positions within the Department of Public Safety. She just recently retired also about a year ago and wanted to come work for us also. So we're very honored and excited to have both of them. Officer Serta is going to be replacing one of our support officers who retired. And the family just keeps on growing, and we're getting fine officers to serve our community and continue the excellent customer service we provide. So if y'all can raise your right hand. When I say aye, y'all say your name. I'm not going to go back. Ready? I do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the duties of the office of police officer for the East Central Independent School District Police Department and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution, the laws of the United States of America, the state of Texas, so help me God. Welcome aboard. Do I have family members? We like to recognize them also.
My son Brian and my daughter Angela.
Raise your hands, guys. Yours outside. Okay. Board, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, very good.
Thank you, Chief. Before we call a recess, I'd like for all of you to know that the video that you saw was put together by students at the high school.
All right, very good.
That's pretty awesome. It was a great opening to our event last evening when we opened the Gary Patterson Center for the Performing Arts. And if you've not had a chance to tour that facility, I suggest that you go out there and take a look at it. It's a really great place for kids to learn and show off, and for our community to gather. So anytime you're out on the high school campus, just whiz on by and have a look at it. It's just a wonderful place to be. So with that, we'll take a 10-minute recess. We'll be back at 7 o'clock, and we'll let those of y'all who need to go on off. Thank you.
Y'all are nuts.
Okay.
Trying to starve me to death.
It's 7 o'clock straight up, and I promised that we would start at 7, and we'll get going on our agenda and have the opportunity to get everybody out of here at a reasonable hour. Our next agenda item is public comments. We've had a number of citizens sign up to speak for public comments. I'll be calling you up in order, but our first speakers are a couple of students who would like to speak to the board and then need to go home and get homework done. So I think we have Robin Troggett.
And I'm a little older than your traditional student, but I have students with me, so that counts. All right, Superintendent Mr. Bryan and trustees of the board, it is January, which is School Board Appreciation Month. So representing both Heritage Middle School and Heritage PTA, we would be remiss to not take this opportunity and acknowledge all that you do, your dedication, your commitment, and your vision for our district, our school, our students, and our families. So as such, we have small tokens of appreciation that they will bring you. And then this wall over here, several hundred of our students wrote you notes of appreciation. And that is on the wall. So perhaps later this evening, you can read that. Thank you.
East Central Way. All right. I'm telling you. Thank you, Robin. We appreciate it. Thank you, everybody.
gonna take over
Y'all
for
have a
me.
good evening. Take care of that homework.
Bye. Love you. Bye.
That's great. So the East Central Way, and we've got signatures on the back. So, yeah, that's great. Appreciate it.
Very nice. Thank you.
All right, thank you for letting us deviate there a little bit and letting some of the kiddos get home. Our first speaker this evening is Keith Kyleman to speak on the Guardian Plan. I'd like to remind you that you have 5 minutes to speak. Please address your comments to the board.
My name is Keith Kyleman. Thank you for having me here tonight. I lived in this district my entire life, went through K through 12 here. I have 2 children in the district as well, a second grader and a pre-K 3 at the PCI Head Start. I'm here to speak about the Guardian Plan. I realize it's not on the agenda today, but it's still pretty raw in the minds and hearts of a lot of parents and residents in the district. I do appreciate y'all's attempts at clarity in the recent past with the forum and the panel discussions and things in the FAQs and the surveys y'all sent out. We do appreciate that. We do feel that quite a bit more transparency is needed. There's just a ton of variables that a plan like this has. It's a very polarizing plan. It gets heated. We found that out. So we just feel that quite a bit more clarity is needed. Also, at the panel discussion, I was a little disappointed that there wasn't a district representative on the panel. I feel like a few of those questions could have been quelled or just kind of calmed down very quickly. Y'all have been discussing this since February, so I feel that that's enough time for some of those questions to kind of be stopped before they started, or just give some people some clarity and some peace of mind, whether they're for or against the plan. In my opinion, I feel that the Guardian Plan is our last option. To me, that's if all of our attempts have gone by the wayside, any redundancies have failed, that's just the absolute last thing we should do. So my question would be, have we tried every option available to us? Have we exhausted every option? If so, then I feel if we need to proceed with a plan like this or proceed talking with a plan like this, it should be above reproach. There should be transparency top to bottom. There should be no questions in the minds of the residents that we're doing the absolute best thing for our faculty, our administration, our students. I feel that, transparency on that is vital. And then also in the transparency, we've been told a couple times that there's things that we can't know, and I understand that. In a program like this, there's a lot of things that just need to be, for safety and security, they just got to be under wraps. But I feel that we need to know what questions not to ask, and also what questions to ask. Where does liability land? We understand that it has to be anonymous on who has the weapons, but can we ask how many weapons, or how many in each district? If we have 10 teachers at one district volunteer and 2 at another, then essentially one school would be more protected than the other. And then if we start swapping teachers around, does that mess with the anonymity? Just tons of variables, tons of questions. And I think that's it for me, for what I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Alicia Reyes Barrientos.
Good evening, Superintendent and board members. I'm Dr. Reyes Barrientos, and I'm an assistant professor of political science at A&M San Antonio. I'm also a member of the SA Commission on Education. I was appointed by Councilwoman Rebecca Villagran, and I represent District 3. My daughter is currently in pre-K for San Antonio, but we live within the bounds of ECISD, and so our hope was that she would begin traditional district schools next year. However, upon hearing about the district's proposal to arm teachers, we were incredibly disappointed because we are morally opposed to having teachers owning guns and having more guns in schools. And so I'm gonna talk about a few of the points here that I have, and they are all on this list that I've compiled. First of all, arming teachers, in my opinion, is a waste of our tax dollars. Rather than spending our tax dollars on expenses incurred by the Guardian Plan, funding should be used to increase teacher and staff salaries, equip teachers with continued pedagogical training, and provide the very best educational resources and facilities for our children. Many families, like my own, are morally opposed to arming teachers. The district's proposal to arm teachers imposes pro-gun ideology and practices on anti-gun families. We should not be forced to send our children to schools with armed teachers. Also, the district will lose support and funding. Many families may opt to enroll their children in gun-free charter or private schools because they are opposed to sending their children to schools with armed teachers. The district could lose thousands of tax dollars due to decreasing enrollment, and most importantly, the support and energy that these committed families offer. And this is an important point because as soon as I found out that this was a proposal that the board is entertaining, I immediately signed up my daughter for 4 lotteries of charter schools. And I am an advocate of traditional district schools. I understand that these charter schools are strongly recruiting. And what happens is that they take funding, and they not only take this funding in the tax dollars, but they also take families that are very committed. And so this is a very important point because this is also something that Councilwoman Villagran brought up. And today, earlier this morning, I met with Chief William McManus, who is the chief of SAPD, and I asked him whether ECISD had been in contact with SAPD about the Guardian proposal. Chief McManus says that he has not received word from the district. This to me is problematic and disconcerting, given that in any emergency situation, SAPD will immediately respond and arrive on our district campuses. I've also been in contact with Councilwoman Rebecca Villagran. She has expressed concern about the lack of coordination with SAPD, as she also contacted Chief William McManus, and the amount of training that should be needed for those who will be armed among our school children. So all of these concerns and others that are included in this handout I bring to you, hoping that you will understand that many families are opposed to any proposal that arms teachers. I thank you very much for this time and for the work that you do for our district, and so I'll cede my time to the next speaker.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is Gabriel Barrientos.
Good evening. Thank you again, board, for allowing me to speak today. I just want to cover just 2 more points on the handout that you just received. So the first one, placing guns in the hands of teachers will increase the likelihood of more accidents, more fatalities, and more fears. And then you can see on, as Dan Staples, a math teacher who served himself in the U.S. Marine Corps, stated that there is a much greater chance of having a negligent discharge of a misplaced weapon or a bad guy getting a hold of that weapon than there is of a teacher actually using it to neutralize the threat. And arming teachers is a huge litigation risk. During the chaos of a mass shooting, an armed teacher could accidentally shoot a child or another school employee. Furthermore, firearms in a classroom setting present enormous risks to life, limb, and mental well-being. Improper firearm storage, even a common problem for American gun owners themselves, could result in student access or theft. And with that, the district could potentially be held liable for these adverse outcomes. So my question and thoughts to you are, with students being in these classrooms and then potentially adding more guns, what is the outcome of that? What could potentially happen? So I hope that you consider these additional points as moving forward with the process. And again, I want to thank you for your time and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Stacy Teet.
Hello, and thank you for your time. I don't mean to take up much of it. My name is Stacy Teet, and I am the mother of 2 children at Heritage Middle School and 1 at Oak Crest. This is my first time ever attending a board meeting, and maybe that's my fault, but we've had children in the school district for 7 years now. My husband and I are both military veterans, but neither one of us are from Texas. We moved to San Antonio after spending more than a decade overseas because of the high quality of life we could provide for our family here. We've been extremely happy with the quality of education we've received and the faculty and staff that have taught our children so far. I heard from a parent at another school that the board was proposed to look at a vote for the Guardian Plan in November. This vote would have added it to the ECISD Emergency Management Plan. I understand that, and I know very well how those work. I can't tell you much more about how it would work at our schools or what it would mean for our district because no information has been shared with me whatsoever in any form of communication from my school. The plan, I am told, would arm certain faculty and staff members as a way of protecting our children. I address you tonight merely to add some context and personal perspective. As part of my military career, I was often required to carry a concealed weapon on my person or be part of a team of covertly armed individuals. During that time, I was witness to more lost or stolen rounds and firearms, accidental misfires, lengthy and messy suicide watch and mental health incidents that happen when people are carrying weapons on their person, and a few accidental shootings. More incidents that had negative outcomes than I ever witnessed the need for us to use these intended weapons. And all of this was by well-trained and experienced marksmen. Adding weapons to a school will have the exact opposite effect I believe the district intends. The risk is far too great and the burden too heavy for our teachers and administrators to have to bear. Please consider making the details of the program more transparent and public to the parents and have open and honest discussions with us before any further actions are taken. The police officers who have been tasked to protect our schools, like the 2 who were sworn in tonight, have been doing an outstanding job. I wave at them every morning as I drop my kids off so far, and I appreciate everything they do for us. Adding more guns to the campus will in fact make their jobs more difficult and more dangerous than if we just leave that task to the trained law enforcement. That's all I have to say. Thank you guys for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is Ken Holt. Mr. Holt? All right, Mr. Holt has apparently departed. Our next speaker is Michelle Rodriguez.
Sorry. Thank you for letting us all be here and giving us the opportunity to speak our voices. Mr. Toscano and board, I am that parent that wants to be communicated to. But it is also because I have the privilege and the opportunity to be diligent about finding that communication. My economic status allows me to be very involved in my children's education, and I recognize that that is my privilege and my responsibility to share as much information I can with parents and friends in the community. The feedback that I have received, whether for or against the Guardian Plan, is just transparency. Parents are pleading for transparency, and at the panel discussion, Mr. Bryant, you said that policies will be published, draft or not. We are petitioning for the draft to be released because we still have questions that have not been answered and that are not answered on the fact sheet. One is, will the district guardians be trained and licensed by the Texas Commission of Law Enforcement? the state mandates 16 hours of training for guardians. And I understand that East Central says that training will be 80 hours for the initial year. But how does that compare to the 643 training hours to acquire a peace officer license?
Ms. Rodriguez, I'm going to correct you a moment.
sir.
We've not drafted any policies. We've not published any policies, so I'm not sure where you got the training hours from. But wherever you got them from, they're not accurate, okay? So
Yes, sir.
please
Uh-huh.
leave us with factual information.
Okay.
Okay? Thank you.
I'll just reference it. It was in an email from Ms. Colas in November. So this may be prior to more information that has been released. But lastly, I would just like to say that I know that this is an issue that we keep discussing, and I appreciate that. And I understand that you have lost plenty of sleep because the complexity of this policy is very vast. But we as parents are losing sleep as well. We're wondering if we should sell our homes and move out of the district. A district that our children love, but we maybe not are able to support. We're up late researching charter and public schools, and there are families that don't have the privilege to do that. They don't have the privilege to move. And they will be stuck losing sleep continuously, worrying if their child's teacher is wearing a gun while they're instructing on the playground or in the cafeterias. And we just ask again for transparency and the ability to have communication and discussion, and hopefully one day see the draft before the decision to vote is made. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, that's everyone who has spoken, who has signed up to speak this evening. I would like to remind everyone that there have been numerous postings on the intranet, the district's internet, public comments, frequently asked questions. We've had a public forum. The board is moving forward with discussing these options, and we'll continue to move forward with discussing these options, whether they're our last option or whether they're our first line of defense. Nothing is going to be taken lightly, and there will be transparency. You will know as much as we can tell you. I promise you that. Not going to be anything that you won't know about that's available to you and that we can tell you about. All right, appreciate all your comments tonight. We thank you for being here. It's important for us to hear from you. It's also important for you to research and seek out factual information. And I would encourage you to look at both sides of that ledger. Look at those websites, look at those sightings that are more pro, and look at those that are against. But most specifically, look at the factual information. Look at the legislation that was passed to create these things. Look at the past performance of the board. Understand that we all either have children in schools or have had children in schools very recently. We're not going to put our families at risk. So again, thank you very much for being here this evening. We'll move on to agenda item 5, superintendent's reports. Mr. Toscano, please.
Trustees, this month's personnel report can be found in your electronic packet on page 9. There's a little bit of activity in there this month, again, as is typical for this time of year, and as is always the case. If you'd like any more specific information regarding any of the employees or positions represented in this month's report, please let me know and we'll get that to you.
All right. Construction update.
Mr. Selby? While he cues that up, I can go through the calendar with you, for you if you'd like. While he cues that up, you want to go through the calendar? Or you want to wait?
Sure.
Okay. Trustees, while Mr. Selby cues that up, if you'll look in your January, February calendar and your miscellaneous packet, I just want to point to a couple of items. The district will be closed for a student and staff holiday on the 21st, which would be Monday. We do have a special board meeting scheduled at 6 o'clock on the 24th here in the boardroom. Moving into February, a couple more holidays to point out. There is a student holiday on Friday, February 1st, but it is a staff development day. So our employees will be here, but our students will be off. And then on the 18th, we have a student holiday as well on President's Day. And again, that's a staff development day for our teachers and staff. And our next regularly scheduled board meeting is on February 21st at 6:30.
Hi, yes, Mr. Toscano, board members, this is your monthly update on the bond. Tradition Elementary School, as you know, has been completed, and we continue to have some additional punch list items that are needing to be completed, and some additional training that's still being provided by Guido contractors. The Gary Patterson Center for the Performing Arts, as you know, we had the dedication yesterday. I have a couple of photographs from there. Had the ribbon cutting on the left and some really outstanding student and staff performances on the right. Really well done. We had the posting of the colors, the pledge, and of course what's been a really great dedication to our fallen heroes, which is sample of the memorial display board is on the right. I just want to have a personal note that I thought the program was extremely well planned and executed, and I was really proud to be part of that. So just want to let everybody know that. And we continue to work on some punch list items at that location as well. Salado Intermediate School, we are in Phase 4 now, and they have, as you can see on the left, that's Wing D, and all the demolition has been completed. They're starting the framing of stud walls in there and doing some rough ends on electrical and plumbing. On the right, you have Wing B, and as you can see, it's completely gutted, and what will be done there is to rebuild the entire thing from the inside out. Phases 1, 2, and 3 are complete. Phase 4 is underway. It was scheduled to be completed by the end of May. We're looking at trying to get Wing D turned over to us by the end of April, and then Wing B would be turned over at the end of May. Phase 5 would go through the summer. Harmony Elementary School, also into Phase 4. They have already done all the demolition. They're framing the walls. They're doing the plumbing rough-in, which you can see on the right. That project is also ahead of schedule. We're looking at turning that over by the end of April to the district, and that way they can move into Phase 5 a little early, and that will be completed in the summer. Con Valley, very similar. They've done their demolition. You have work being done on the left and right on plumbing and trenching and rough ends. You can see they've already started framing some of the new walls on the inside, and they're well underway. And this will be kind of the same story all over again. They're ahead of schedule on all of their projects, so we're looking at turning that over by the end of April to us in Phase 4 so they can get a head start on Phase 5. Salado Elementary School, Phase 4, they've done all their demolition. They've done some of their mechanical ductwork, as you can see on the left. They're framing up all the walls, and they're also beginning the electrical and any plumbing rough ends that they need to do. And once again, deja vu all over again. We have the same story. They're about a month ahead of schedule, and we'll be turning that over early to us. John Glenn High School Annex, we have all the demolition is done there as well. You have the gym on the left and right. This is the exterior. They've painted it. Looks like a brand new building with that paint coat on there. It's amazing what paint does. And then on the right, you have the framing and starting of rough in on the classroom area on the inside. At the main academic building, you have the painting that's been is near completion. They have the demolition done there, and they're doing continued work on restoring the restrooms there. They're supposed to be completed by June. Their plan is to finish that much earlier than that. At ECDC, we've met, we've walked it down. We're starting to go through design development. That should be completed this month. We'll start with schematic design on that in February. Have construction documents, as you can see, in March. Go to the board in April, and have construction done in the summer. And I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have at this time.
All right. That's some good news.
Thank you.
Anyone have any questions for Mr. Selby? No? All right.
Trustees, I would like to add, for those renovation projects, if you haven't been there in a while, if you'd like to take a look, it's very impressive, and it's probably, at this point, if you hadn't been there in a few months, it's worth popping in. So if you would like to visit any of the campuses that are well under renovation in Phase 4, let me know, and we'll schedule something. I think you'd be very, very excited and impressed to see what's been done thus far and get a real good sense of what's going to happen when it's done.
Nice, thank you.
All right, we're going to move on to our action agenda. Item A, community-based accountability system pillars.
Yes, trustees, as you're aware, and Ms. Hertz will give you a little overview, we're in the second year of working on our community-based accountability system. We adopted as a board last year the first 3 pillars. We assembled our metrics and reported findings to the board and to the community. We published those and mailed them to every home. The committee continued working throughout the fall and has developed 4 additional pillars which will round out the entire system. And so at this time, Ms. Hertz will just give the board a brief overview of those 4 new pillars.
Good evening, Mr. Bryant, Mr. Toscano, members of the board. The 4 additional pillars will be community engagement and partnerships, student learning and progress, fiscal and operational systems, and engaged and well-rounded students. And you can see on page 12 in your packet, also shown there are the pillar function for each of those, as well as sub-pillars. And so if you'll recall from when we reported to you in June, we gathered data to answer key questions for each of those sub-pillars. And so starting on page 13 in your board packet are some key questions to go along with each of those sub-pillars, and all of that was developed by our committee. We did add a few more people to the committee this year, particularly because we did the fiscal and operational system, so we did have some of the folks from those departments come and be part of the committee to work on that particular pillar. So our plan is going forward this spring, we will put subcommittees together just like we did last spring, but this time it will be for all 7 of the pillars. And those committees will gather our data about each of these pillars, and we'll report to you again in June, but on all 7 pillars, and then again we'll do a community report in the fall. And these are the final pillars, so it's all built out now. Be happy to answer any questions.
Anyone have any questions?
Okay. Mr. President, trustees, I recommend board approval of the 4 additional pillars, the pillar functions, and sub-pillars to include in the district's community-based accountability system.
All right, we have a recommendation from the superintendent to approve the 4 additional pillars for our community-based accountability system. Chair will entertain a motion. We have a motion down, okay. Ms. Brazil, and a second. Ms. Barrientos. Any questions, comments? I know you all have been working hard on this. It's a wonderful task, but it's a tedious task. I was fortunate enough to sit through some of the initial pillars, and the work's just amazing. So thank you very much for that work. All right, our agenda item is community-based accountability system pillars. We have a recommendation from the superintendent. We have a motion by Ms. Brazil and a second by Ms. Barrientos. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Item B, ESC 20 RDSPD dissolution process. That's a mouthful.
Yes, sir, Mr. President, trustees. This item is found in your electronic packet on page 17 with corresponding resolution beginning on page 18. If you'll recall, trustees, dating back to 2008, the district entered into a cooperative agreement with 12 other school districts to host part of a regional day school program for the deaf. And that partnership included 2 cluster sites. So any students who were ARTed to receive their education as a deaf ed student, if they were in K through 8th grade, they attended Mission Academy in SAISD. When they transitioned into 9th grade from 9 to 12, we served them here at the high school. And again, there were 12 member districts. And so any students in the program were served at either of the 2 cluster sites. The fiscal agent was Region 20 for that program. And in September, that management board, which has representatives from all of the member school districts, voted and agreed to dissolve that arrangement. And the reason for that was because of declining enrollment in all of the member schools, and it was just not fiscally responsible to continue to operate in that way. Since then, SAISD got approved to carry their own regional day school program, K to 12. So essentially, what we're asking you to consider tonight is to dissolve our cluster site for 9 to 12, because we're then going to send a letter of intent to SAISD to allow the cluster site to be Highlands High School, so that the students will matriculate K through 12 in the deaf ed program in SAISD. And there will be 24 member school districts. So it's a lot more efficient to operate that program for all of those districts. Just to kind of give you a little bit more information, currently we serve 2 students, 9 to 12 from 12 different school districts. Just so happens the 2 currently are not ECISD students. So the numbers are very small. What will also come with your decision tonight is that, well, actually what comes with Region 20's decision to not be the fiscal agent is we will no longer receive funding as a cluster site. So the staff associated with that would be affected. We have 1 certified teacher, we have 3 deaf interpreters, and 1 deaf support specialist. Those staff members we're working very closely with to fold into SAISD's program. They will be interviewed. They're not guaranteeing them a position necessarily, but the plan is for them to be considered and to have that opportunity. Of course, they're very marketable. Staff with these credentials are few and far between. In addition to that, we also have students that we serve through itinerant services. These are students who do not receive deaf education all day, but they receive accommodations and support in the regular ed classroom. And so itinerant services are going to be provided through SAISD, and they'll be provided in their schools. So those students, which we have 15 currently, are ECISD students, and they'll continue to be served through itinerant teachers, but they will not be our itinerant teachers. The arrangement before was 3 were ours and 3 were SAISD's, but all 6 served students in 12 districts. So now essentially we'll pay SAISD for their itinerant support services for our students. So those students will not be moving out of ECISD, but the cluster site for 9 to 12 deaf ed will be moving out of ECISD should you approve this evening. There were 2 other options for us to consider aside from SAISD, and that was North Side ISD has their own regional day school program, as does Northeast, but from proximity's sake for our families, we felt that it just made more sense in the fact that the students will matriculate through, they had already been attending K to 8 in SAISD. It just makes more sense for those students, which we do have 3 in the K to 8 program at this time. So they'll just be able to stay in SAISD as opposed to move into one of the other 2 options, is kind of our plan. I'd be happy to answer any additional questions. Of course, our special education director, Ms. Pugh, is here with us tonight. If we have any questions in addition to what I've presented, we'd be happy to do our best to answer those.
Anyone have any questions?
So we're no longer going to receive the funding for the cluster sites, but ECISD students that'll be served by SAISD, correct? So what is that
Yes.
gonna cost? Is that gonna be like
I don't
registered
anticipate the
on-
cost to be, do we expect the cost for the itinerant services?
Any other questions? All right, I believe we're ready for your recommendation, sir.
Trustees, I recommend board approval of the ESC 20 Regional Day School Program for the Deaf Disillusion Resolution as presented. That's a tongue twister.
All right, we have a recommendation from the superintendent to dissolve the Regional Deaf Special Ed Program. Chair will entertain a motion.
So move.
We have a motion by Mr. Garza. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second by Ms. Barrientos. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Item C, discussion and possible action regarding an interlocal cooperation agreement for the Cooperative Disciplinary Alternative Education Program.
Trustees, we bring this to you every year and have since 2008. You're very aware that our alternative education program is a cooperative arrangement between us and several school districts, most of which are in Wilson County. Floresville ISD is the fiscal agent and host that programming. So our students who are in an alternative education placement or a juvenile justice alternative education placement, we bus to Floresville's facility, as do the other member districts. The only thing that's different about this one is that last year, and it's actually the exact same as last year, we changed the fee structure. So as a cooperative, we all agreed that purchasing seats didn't make as much sense as purchasing days for the year. It's a little bit easier to manage and makes a little bit more sense. So we came up with a fee structure that was comparable, but gave us the latitude to manage the number of seats of days throughout the year that we actually used. And so as a result, we did get 2 refund checks this year, one for $49,000 for the DAEP, and then another for just under $7,000 for the JJAEP. But we also did serve more students this year in that program this past year. And so overall, we still think that it's a good value for the district. They are meeting our students' needs academically. They're very good to work with, and the cooperative arrangement is pretty whole and working well. So our Student Services Department still highly recommends that we continue to work together with Floresville for this particular programming. And so be happy to answer any questions about the DAEP Memorandum of Understanding.
Any questions on the DAEP? All right, I believe we're ready.
Trustees, I recommend board approval of the interlocal cooperation agreement for the Cooperative Disciplinary Alternative Education Program as presented.
I have a recommendation from the superintendent to accept the interlocal cooperative agreement as presented. Chair will entertain a motion.
So moved.
We have a motion by Mr. Massengale. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second by Mr. Mulkey. Any questions, any comments? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Item D, discussion and possible action regarding an interlocal cooperative agreement for the Wilson County Juvenile Justice Alternative Education Program.
Trustees, this is just the partner to the previous MOU. This would be for the JJAEP program, which is housed at the same facility managed by Floresville as well. Same partner district, same arrangement. The only difference is the kids that are in the Juvenile Justice Alternative Education Program spend longer days there. It's a little bit more restrictive environment. It's a little bit more serious placement. And so the cost per day is a little bit more, but the overall expense is insignificant relative to what we pay for DAEP. So it's a very minimal cost. We have very few students that ever end up being served there. So this agreement is basically mirroring last year's same fee structure, same cost for days. And we again feel like it's presenting a good value and meeting our needs for the very few kids that end up in that placement.
Any questions for Mr. Toscano? All right, sir.
Okay, Mr. President, I recommend board approval of the interlocal cooperation agreement for the Wilson County Juvenile Justice Alternative Education Program as presented.
We have a recommendation from the superintendent to accept the proposal for the JJAEP program with Wilson County. Chair will entertain a motion.
So moved.
We have a motion by Mr. Garza. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second by Ms. Brazil. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Does any board member wish to have an item pulled from the consent agenda? If not, the chair will entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented. We have a motion by Mr. Massengale. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second by Mr. Mulkey. The consent agenda is approved via unanimous consent. And with that, we've reached agenda item 8, adjournment. Chair will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Have a motion by Mr. Garza. Is there a second? Mr. Mulkey. We are adjourned via unanimous consent. Thank you all very much for attending this evening.